morning and welcome, friends, to our Sunday meeting. As you are all aware, this lodge meets every Sunday at 11 a.m. for the discussion of a particular topic on theosophical subjects presented by a student. On the first and third Sundays of the month, we have a study class after this meeting, which will start around 12:30 for 1 hour, and we're studying The Key by H.P. Blavatsky. The movement of the 19th century that brought the philosophy of the masters into the world for the first time has been recorded in books that H.P., Mr. Judge, and R.C. wrote, and then Mr. Wadia followed in the same tradition. These books are available to students of Theosophy in their pure form. They're printed as the original was, and they're available for those who wish to obtain them, both here and also the printing is done in California, and that is also available, and it's online. The purpose of the movement was to offset the tendencies of humanity and move them in the right direction, because the West suffers from materialism and the East from superstition. The masters could not infiltrate the superstition going on in India and those areas surrounding it. The best possibility for the introduction of this philosophy was to the West. So they brought it out in the 19th century, H.P. formulating the Theosophical Society in 1875. Even though there has been divergences in the teachings by many lodges, the philosophy remains the same. Philosophy itself cannot be changed. What is given in those books is a complete skeletal system that the masters brought out into the world. It is necessary to understand it in its completeness, and as our intuitive and discriminative powers increase, then we can fill in what is missing. The tendency of humanity is to study things superficially. This study is not that kind of study. It requires deep thinking, meditation on what has been read, and only then does it really release its inner meaning to the student after many, many, many years of effort. This lodge presents these topics that were covered in the books from one perspective at a time, because the philosophy is very extensive. Today we will be doing the Sevenfold Nature of Man, and the psychology of the East is based on this, whereas in the West it's missing. So we truly need to align our teaching processes to the Eastern psychology so that humanity can actually understand the purpose of being here, the highest possible that is reachable by humanity, and actually exemplify brotherhood in their daily living in moving towards this direction. So today's talk is a necessary step in that direction. The declaration of this lodge, as well as all of the United Lodges of Theosophies, states that devotion to the cause of Theosophy independently, without professing attachment to any theosophical organization, is the aim. It is loyal to the great founders of the theosophical movement, but does not concern itself with dissensions or differences of individual opinion. The work it has on hand and the end it keeps in view are too absorbing and too lofty to leave it the time or inclination to take part in side issues. That work and that end is the dissemination of the fundamental principles of the philosophy of Theosophy and the exemplification in practice of those principles through a truer realization of the self, a profounder conviction of universal brotherhood. It holds that the unassailable basis for union among theosophists, wherever and however situated, is similarity of aim, purpose, and teaching, and therefore has neither constitution, bylaws, nor officers, the sole bond between its associates being that basis, and it aims to disseminate this idea among theosophists in the furtherance of unity. It regards as theosophists all who are engaged in the true service of humanity without distinction of race, creed, sex, condition, or organization, and it welcomes to its association all those who are in accord with its declared purposes and who desire to fit themselves by study and otherwise to be the better able to help and teach others. The true theosophist belongs to no cult or sect, yet belongs to each and all. The following is signed by associates of the United Lodge of Theosophists. The form. Being in sympathy with the purposes of this lodge, as set forth in its declaration, I hereby record my desire to be enrolled as an associate, it being understood that such association calls for no obligation on my part other than that which I myself determine. Today's reading comes from the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna, thou grievest for those that may not be lamented, whilst thy sentiments are those of the expounders of the letter of the law. Those who are wise in spiritual things grieve neither for the dead nor for the living. I myself never was not, nor thou, nor all the princes of this earth, nor shall we ever hereafter cease to be. As the Lord of this mortal frame experienceth therein infancy, youth, and old age, so in future incarnations will it meet the same. One who is confirmed in this belief is not disturbed by anything that may come to pass. The senses, moving toward their appropriate objects, are producers of heat and cold, pleasure and pain, which come and go and are brief and changeable. These do thou endure, of son of Bharata. For the wise man, whom these disturb not, to whom pain and pleasure are the same, is fitted for immortality. There is no existence for that which does not exist, nor is there any non-existence for that which exists. By those who see the truth and look into the principles of things, the ultimate characteristic of these both is seen. Learn that he, by whom all things were formed, is incorruptible, and that no one is able to effect the destruction of it, which is inexhaustible. Now today's talk, Sevenfold Nature of Man.
Good morning. To follow on topics discussed today, we'll be talking about the sevenfold nature of man. This refers to the composition of humankind. To begin, I want to first allude to Plato, the student of Socrates. Plato was an initiate and therefore could not go into forbidden details. However, he was acquainted with archaic doctrine, in finding the seven combinations of aspects of soul and spirit. Plato in particular regarded man as constituent of two parts, one eternal, form of the same essence of absoluteness, and the other part being mortal and corruptible, deriving its constituent parts from the minor created gods. As shown, man is composed, according to him, as of a mortal body, and number two, and of an immortal principle, and three, a separate mortal kind of soul. And this is what has been called, according to him, the physical man, the spiritual soul of spirit, and the animal soul, the nous and the psyche. This is the division adopted by another initiate called Paul, who maintains that there is a psychical body which is shown in the corruptible astral soul or body, and a spiritual body that is raised in incorruptible substance. In this regard, in this board, we have a diagram that we have a classification for the septenary constitution of man. First, I want to address what is known as the lower quadrant, the lower quaternary. From here, with in this method of the constitution of man, of humankind, we first have rupa, also in Sanskrit known as stula sarira, which is what represents what we know as the physical body. It's the basis. It's the most concrete level it's the center also of humankind, of the animal essence, which demarcates the separation between mortal men from the eternal identity. It's the vehicle of all principles during life. Above it, we have prana jiva, which is the vital principles, the vitality, the life. This is necessary for the two categorizations above and the one below, and it has a lot of relevance to the lower manas, which we'll address later on. Above it, we have the linga sharira, which refers to the astral body. This is also known as the phantom body. In esoteric circles, it's known for the astral plane to be addressed. It's another level, but the upper we go, the more spiritual the constitution becomes. Kama refers to the animal soul. This is where we see the division when it starts between the higher levels of spirituality and the levels from which were more based on material concrete existence in that way. The upper three constitutions are what is known as the upper imperishable triad. Here we have manas, which is known as the human soul, however, which is further divided into two aspects of mind: the higher mind and the lower mind. In this, in the state of the karmic state of each individual depends a lot on whether on what level the person gravitates the most to. Is it more towards the lower mind aspect or to the higher mind aspect? Which can then connect the person. If the person were to be more connected with the lower mind, then the person may be more attracted to more, let's say, passions in the world that are not necessarily so connected to spirituality. If the person is more connected with the higher mind, the person may have more interests in sacred, in transcendental aspects of life and existence. The upper level Buddhi refers to the spiritual soul, and this is considered to be the vehicle of pure universal spirit. This is Buddha, if we were to analyze the term, is known as, refers to the term the awakened one, or the state of being awake. Someone that gravitates, that is successful in reaching such a high level of existence, would be more, who have a higher state of consciousness and comprehension and compassion towards all sentient beings. And then above this is the Atma, which is the spirit, which is one with the absolute. It could be considered to be the religare, the reunion with the source. That's the way a way we could analyze the septenary nature of man. It's important to note that the lower four principles are perishable. They can cease to this is what can cease in a person. The upper triad is what is considered to be transcendental, immortal. It's a higher trinity in this regard. It transcends the senses. It's important to note that the concepts, especially the higher triad, is considered to have been influential and be considered to be present in the way modern day Christianity presents the concept of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, but explained in a different way. It has been some groups, it has been considered to be allegoric of that. This is not. Greeks also have alluded to many of these concepts, but with different terms. And in Christianity, as we mentioned, it's been considered. Another way to constitute this in Christianity has been of the vision of body, soul, and spirit, which is a more simplified visualization or conceptualization of the nature of man. However, as was alluded to earlier before my presentation, this represents a more Eastern point of view of the constitution of humankind, which, as was mentioned, is not so addressed in Western philosophies. But that's what we are here for, and it's important to share this knowledge so people can become more aware of this, so individuals can work harder to try to achieve this high level, so they can feel more realized. They can achieve that state of realization. I mentioned Christianity. I should mention that other individuals in spirituality circles have other philosophies have also addressed similar topics. One of them is philosophies in India have addressed this with different terminology. In Indians, they are considered to possess other terms in their language, but they did not use a septenary classification, but depended chiefly on a fourfold one, answer and conceal the doctrine in 7 globes, including our Earth. Of this, I can allude to how important for the prana. I wanted to highlight that in Indian philosophies, it's considered to, as it mentioned, the vitality, it's considered to be an essential constituent element of humankind, like as analog to the air we breathe, as essential as that. Respecting the nature of man, there are two ideas current in the religious circles of Christianity. One is the teaching, and the other the common acceptation of it. The first is not secret, to be sure, in the church, but it is so seldom dwelt upon in the hearing of the laity as to be almost arcane for the ordinary person. Nearly everyone says he has a soul and a body, and there it ends. which is a very important aspect of this presentation, of the transcendence of humankind, what the soul is and whether it is the real person or whether it has any powers of its own are not inquired to. The preachers usually confining themselves to a salvation or damnation, and thus talking of it as something different from oneself. The people have acquired an underlying notion that they are not souls, because the soul may be lost by them. From this has come about a tendency to materialism, causing men to pay more attention to the body than to the soul, the latter being left to the tender mercies of the priests of the Roman Catholicism, and among dissenters the care of it is more frequently put off to the dying day. But when the true teaching is known, it will be seen that the care of the soul, which is the self, is a vital matter, requiring attention every day, and it should not be deferred without grievous injury resulting to the whole man, both soul and body. That's one. From what I read, I just want to highlight that's one of the most important principles of Theosophy, which is to promote the search for spirituality, rather than leaving that to be something people address at their later life stages. The Christian teaching, supported by St. Paul, since upon him in fact dogmatic Christianity rests, is that man is composed of body, soul, and spirit, and that's the threefold constitution of man from Christianity. Not to be confused with this view, but to see this connection. It is believed by theologians, but kept in the background because its examination might result in the adoption of views once or considered orthodox, but now heretics. For when we thus place soul between spirit and body, we come very close to the necessity for looking into the question of the soul's responsibility, since mere body can have no responsibility. And in order to make the soul responsible for the acts performed, we must assume that it has powers and functions. From that it is easy to take the position that the soul may be rational or irrational, as the Greeks sometimes thought, and then there is but a step to further theosophical propositions. This threefold scheme of nature of man contains, in fact, the theosophical teachings of the Sevenfold Constitution. That being the threefold constitution. This threefold scheme of nature of man, in fact, contains the theosophical teachings of the Sevenfold Constitution, because the four other divisions missing from the category can be found in the powers and functions of the body and the soul, as we will show later on. The body part could be more represented in the lower quaternary, whereas the soul and spirit are more accurately represented in the higher triad. This conviction that man is a septenary and not merely a dual was held long ago and very plainly taught to everyone with accompanying demonstrations, but like other philosophical tenets, it disappeared from sight, because gradually withdrawn at the time when in the east of Europe morals were degenerating and before materialism had gained full sway in company with skepticism, its twin. Upon its withdrawal, the present dogma of body, soul, spirit was left to Christianity. The reason for that concealment and its renaissance in this century is well described by Madame Helena Petronila Blavatsky in The Secret Doctrine. In answer to the statement, we cannot understand how any danger could arise from the revelation of such a purely philosophical doctrine as the evolution of the planetary change, she says. The danger was the following. Doctrines such as the planetary change or the seven races at once give a clue to the sevenfold nature of man, for each principle is correlated to a plane, a planet, and a race, and the human principles are, on every plane, correlated to sevenfold occult forces, those of of the higher planes being of tremendous occult powers, the abuse of which would cause incalculable evil to humanity. A clue which is perhaps no clue to the present generation, especially the Westerners, protected as they are by their very blindness and ignorant materialistic disbelief in the occult, but a clue which would, nevertheless, have been very real in the early centuries of the Christian era, to people fully convinced of the reality of occultism and entering a cycle of degradation which made them ripe for abuse of occult powers and sorcery of the worst description. Mr. A.P. Sinet, who at one time was an official in the government of India, first outlined in this century the real nature of man in his book, Esoteric Buddhism, which was made up from information conveyed to him by Elena Petronila Blavatsky, which was made up from information conveyed to him by Blavatsky information conveyed to her from the great lodge of initiates to which reference has been made. And in thus placing the old doctrine before Western civilization, he conferred a great benefit on this generation and helped considerably the cause of Theosophy. His classification was Rupa, or the body, Prana Jiva, which refers again to the vital principles of vitality, Linga Sahira, which refers to astral body, Kama, being the animal soul, Manas, representing the human soul, further divided into the higher mind and lower mind, Buddhi, representing the spiritual soul, and Atma, the spirit. This classification stands to this day for all practical purposes, but it is capable of modification and extension. For instance, a later arrangement which places astral body second instead of third in the category does not substantially alter it. It at once gives an idea of what man is, very different from the vague description by the words body and soul, and also boldly challenges the materialistic conception that mind is the product of brain, a portion of the body. No claim is made that these principles were hitherto unknown, for they were all understood in various ways, not only by the Hindus, but by many Europeans. Yet the compact presentation of the Sevenfold Constitution of Man in intimate connection with the septenary constitution of a chain of globes through which the being evolves had not been given out at the time. One person from France, Eliphas Levi, wrote about the astral realm, that the astral body, and about the astral realm and the astral body, but evidently had no knowledge of the remainder of the doctrine. And while the Hindus processed the other terms in their language and philosophy, they did not use a septenary classification, but depended chiefly on a fourfold one, and certainly concealed, if they knew of it, the doctrine of a chain of 7 globes, including our Earth. Indeed, a learned Hindu, Scuba Rowe, now deceased, asserted that they knew of a sevenfold classification, but it had not been and would not be given out. Back in those times, these kind of teachings were more hermetic, were not so open to public like we fortunately are now. Considering these constituents in another matter, we should say that the lower man is a composite being, but in his real nature is a unity or immortal being, comprising a trinity of spirit, discernment, and mind, which requires 4 lower mortal instruments or vehicles through which to work in matter and obtain experience from nature. This trinity is that called Atma Buddhi and Manas in Sanskrit. In here, while Atma is considered spirit, Buddhi is the highest power of intellection. Importantly, is that which discerns and judges, and Manas is the mind. This threefold collection is the real man, the real essence. And beyond doubt, the doctrine is the origin. Is the origin of the theological one of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, or Father, Mother, and Son, which are other other ways of looking at it. These lower material constituents are transitory and subject to disintegration in themselves, as well as to separation from each other. When the hour arrives for the separation to begin, the combination can no longer be kept up. The physical body dies, the atoms of which each of the four is composed begin to separate from each other, and the whole collection, being disjointed, is no longer fit for one as an instrument for the real man. This is what is called death among us mortals, but it is not death for the real man because he is deathless, persistent, and immortal. He is therefore called the Triad, or indestructible Trinity, while they are known as the quaternary and mortal four. This quaternary or lower man is a product of cosmic or physical laws and substance. He has been evolved during a lapse of ages, like any other physical thing, from cosmic substance, and is therefore subject to physical, physiological, and psychical laws, which govern the race of man as a whole. Hence, its period of possible continuance can be calculated just as the limit of tensile strain among metals used in bridge building can be deduced by an engineer, which alludes to the original definition of stress, which is the pressure, the breaking point of a metal. Any one collection in the form of man made up of these constituents is therefore limited in duration by the laws of the evolutionary period in which it exists. Just now, that is generally 70 to 100 years, but its possible duration is longer. Thus, there are instances where ordinary persons have lived to be 200 years of age, for instance, and by a knowledge of the occult laws of nature, the possible limit of duration may be extended nearly to 400 years. It will be seen that the physical part of our nature is thus extended to a second department, which, though invisible to the physical eye, is nevertheless material and subject to decay. Because people in general have been in the habit of admitting to be real only what they can see with their physical eye, they have at last come to suppose that the unseen is neither real nor material. But they forgot that even on the earth plane, noxious gases are invisible through real and powerful material, and that water may exist in the air, held suspended and invisible until conditions alter and cause its precipitation. On that, I want to share a metaphor before recapitulating this and wrapping up the session. There's an allegory of a child once asked a Buddhist student, how can the principle of an absolute, of a God, a creator, a God, exist, but yet we never see it? And the teacher told the student to take a glass and pour sugar on it and dissolve it using a spoon. Then ask the person to take a straw and try and taste this from various corners. And the person said, it tastes like water with sugar in this corner. Try it on this corner, from this corner, from this corner, from the bottom, from the top, and it stays the same. And the person said this is a metaphor for how it's possible for there to be levels of existence, yet you don't see it. You cannot really see it, but it's there. To let us recapitulate before going into details, the real man is the trinity of Atma, Buddhi, Manas, or spirit and mind, and he uses certain agents and instruments to get in touch with nature in order to know himself. These instruments and agents are found in the lower four, or the quaternary. Each principle in which category is of itself an instrument for the particular experience belonging to its own field, the body being the lowest, the physical body, least important and most transitory of the whole series. For when we arrive at the body on the way down from the higher mind, it can be shown that all of its organs are in themselves senseless and useless when deprived of the man within. Sight, hearing, touch, taste, and swelling do not pertain to the body, but to the second unseen physical man. The real organs for the exercise of those powers being in the astral body, and those in the physical body being but the mechanical outer instruments for making the coordination between nature and the real organs inside. With this, I conclude this part of the presentation, and I'm open to answer any questions from the audience.
Mom always said, let your conscience be your guide. Can you relate conscience to what you're talking about up there?
Sure. I particularly would. I think that's it's perhaps most related in the more transcendental point of view. It could be especially alluded to the higher triad. But in the more contemporary versions, we could focus more on the manas part, as we mentioned, because of it being related to the mind and intelligence. I think that's where we can highlight consciousness in the way it's commonly understood the most.
But you talked about manas as higher and lower.
Yes.
Now, is conscious part of higher or lower or both?
It's conscious. It's of both. I would say not both. It's what is different is the state of consciousness. I would consider it to be more dormant, an unawakened level of consciousness in the people who gravitate more towards the lower mind. In the people who gravitate more towards the higher mind, they could be considered to be closer to a more awakened state of consciousness, closer to the Buddha level.
So what you're saying, it is really higher, but people who don't pay attention to it drown it out. The lower takes charge. Is that what you're telling me? The lower tendencies, passions and desires and all that.
In a sense that it becomes more of a habit to gravitate more towards that, and unfortunately, the higher level qualities are not being fulfilled. It's the analog of having a talent, but that is not pursued or is not exploited to its furthest extent.
So you lose it.
You lose it, kind of. So yeah, so there's a lot of potential for altruism, for many capacities, but if the person doesn't use it, it's gonna be lost. The person's gonna be gravitating more to that. As the old saying goes, tell me who you hang out with, and I'll tell you who you are. Or tell me what you talk about the most, and I'll tell you who you are. And analog to that, if someone devotes their lives, they talk, they hang out, they spend time with people who are like-minded and are very attracted to spirituality topics. It's sooner or later the person will gravitate more toward more higher states of consciousness. If the person devotes more time to more mundane passions, if you will, that's what the person's life is going to go into. That's what's going to end up becoming what that person actually ends up becoming. That's what I think we humans all have consciousness. It's just what they focus in what area gets more developed, and in what areas it ends up being more dormant and not awakened or not used to its fullest extent. Yes.
So then, in the West, many people are not familiar with this classification. So if you're just looking at yourself as body, soul, and spirit, then how are you supposed to overcome the lower tendencies? If you don't know how your mind functions, and that karma actually is part of the lower mind, and the intellect part of it, and your tendencies to gravitate towards it, then you're not really aware of the inner life of your soul. So how would you then overcome those difficulties without this classification, because many people are not familiar with this system. Because you said, according to the Christian religion, it is defined that you have a soul and you lose it at death. But in this system, you are the soul. You just lose your body at death.
Yeah.
So it's a reversal of the statement, but it makes all the difference in your life, because then you believe that you're coming back, where karma and reincarnation is part of this philosophy. Because in one life, how can one reach perfection? It's not possible.
Well, yeah. On the lines of what you just said, it for sure marks a very different approach to life. Knowing this, being aware of it, working hard to try to live up to this and make the most of it, versus someone who does not have that. The people who don't have this kind of knowledge, they could be how can I say, someone, in my sincere opinion, they could go on to lead very righteous lives. The effect is that they could not, in a conscious manner, address the full, each of the constituents addressed here, which gives because of being more conscious of this, it gives an advantage to people who have direct access to this knowledge, so they can know how to orient themselves towards this path to enlightenment. That's how I would describe it. I'm not saying it's impossible for other people, but it's of course, knowledge is power. It's an advantage, and it becoming aware of this for sure helps. Can be of help to any human being. I think Josh had a question.
You said that as we go higher on this list, it's more and more spiritual. Does that spiritual nature really carry all the way to this physical body? Does the physical body, does it diminish to the point where there's nothing spiritual about the physical body, or does the physical body also have some spirituality?
So as above, so below. My impression, my understanding is that there are spiritual elements. It's not like it's just if I were to make a metaphor between this and matter. Matter is neither created nor destroyed; it transforms. There is, if I were to make a metaphor, with all due respect to this constitution, I believe the higher triad to be more analog to the gas state of matter, where we cannot see it, like oxygen. I cannot really see oxygen, but it's there. And on a more concrete level, gases can transform into liquid states. And then liquid states can eventually transform into solid matter. So that's my personal way of viewing and understanding this in that metaphor. But it's still matter at the end of the day. So in this metaphor, if we substitute the word matter for spirit, I believe there's a spirit, that there are spiritual constituents to all of them, but in the higher triad, it's that's like the essence of it, whereas lower is more material. Yes.
It sounds then, if we can extend that analogy a little bit, that there's a difference, like a quantitative difference in the amount of energy in the system, or the electromagnetic frequency, perhaps, between one end of the range and the other.
For sure. No, it's different. Nonetheless, I don't get me wrong. I'm not saying the level of spirituality is the same on the upper and on the lower. I'm not saying that. But as in that metaphor, yes, there's differences for sure. I could not agree more. Yeah.
But you also said that all of that exists for the soul's experience. So it's the soul that is using the mind. The mind is using the brain and the physical constituents of the body. However, there's a very good article by HPB. It's Noetic Action, the title, Noetic and Psychic Action. And in that one, she explains how the constituent parts from the higher influences the lower. And she says that atoms are not physical. They are psycho-spiritual entities that constitutes the body. And that is why the mind can affect it in two different ways. If the mind is altruistic and it works with the spiritual aspect of the inner life, then all of the atoms in the human body are turned towards it. But if the human mind is connected to that karmic principle and the human passions and desires are constantly affecting the intellectual mind, then the atoms are subservient to that thinking principle, and it's downward. Its tendency is downward. But it was very interesting that she says atoms are not physical, and not a single scientist has ever seen one.
Yes.
They're psycho-spiritual. Interesting.
I couldn't find it more interesting. I agree.
It's very interesting.
Sandra.
I'm curious to understand more of the differences between the manas, human soul, and kama, animal soul. And do animals have their upper triad? And if they don't have upper triad, is everything of them is destroyed in this lifetime, but then how do they progress? There must be something internal in them as well. So curiosity.
I can only speculate. I on that answer to that I want to clarify that what I would say now may not necessarily reflect specifically Theosophical points of view, but my point of view, the way of tying it to Theosophy itself. In Theosophy, there's a concept of evolution and reincarnation and cycles of existence. And technically, there's the view that life has evolved from mineral states to vegetative states to animal states and eventually to human states. And in my view is that there is, following the question from her, there is consciousness levels in many of these of those forms of life. However, it evolves. I sincerely do believe that there is by evolution more higher levels of consciousness are built, and animal the period where you're asking for, which is the between manas and kama. My view would be that indeed that is the stage is being set for higher levels of existence, of perhaps more transcendental existence to begin. Now, to what extent can perhaps it transcends our way of the way we if we try to have a view of animals sharing the same transcendental principles humans are considered to have in this philosophy of Theosophy, it may be or may not be so accurate, but that's not to say animals don't have. I think if there's animals are considered to be like the step before humankind begins, it makes sense for them to have some somewhat connection. However, that would be I don't want to speculate on that matter. Yes, Tujay.
Again, HPB explains it. It's on page 291 to 293 in Secret Doctrine 1, and Sandra should read that article for herself because she explains it in there. She says that the life wave goes through all of these lower kingdoms, and that when it comes to the animal stage, the upper is dormant. All of it is there.
It's
not
there, but
active.
dormant. That makes
It's
sense.
dormant.
That's what I thought. Yeah.
And the animals have group souls. And that individualization, she says, occurs, and she gives dogs and elephants as an example, that in these groups, individualization has been carried out to its highest level before it moves into the human kingdom. So they do have souls. She says in that passage, the life wave to the mineral gives polarity, positive, negative. To the plant life, it gives color and odor, aroma. And in the animal kingdom, it gives it instinct. Animals live by instinct. They know exactly how to deal with situations. Their lives are based on instinct, and it never fails them because they follow it. In the human kingdom, all these are available, but it adds the 49 fires to it, which is the mind. We have become self-conscious because the mind is active in us to a full degree. In the animal kingdom, rudimentary intelligence and instinct is there, and it becomes higher and higher as you go into the individualization in the animal kingdom. But they have group souls, so they don't have devachanic stay as humans do, and they immediately reincarnate into a higher form.
Any other questions? Herb?
Yeah, just to continue on, what about when we become humans? How do we deal with that part of it? We don't have quote instinct anymore.
Yeah, you do.
We advance by, according to the declaration, self-induced and self-devised methods. So we can go up or go down based on our own behavior?
According to Theosophical philosophy, no. Evolution happens in one direction. If you become human, let's say from having been an animal in the past, even if the person were to behave in a non-conscious way, let's say the person were to devote a life of crime, even if the person were to not live a righteous life, it can't go back to the view that, oh, the person is going to be punished by coming back in this life as an animal and suffering. From theosophical point of view, from his philosophy, it's not like that. It's if that happens, then the person would need to, in a human form, deal with that, the karma generated in that life. But once the person reaches, once the organism, the life we're talking about reaches at a higher level, it can go back.
Or how does it go forward? I mean, once I become self-conscious, I'm then responsible for my own actions, is my question. Is that it then? I might not go back to animal, but will I progress if I don't pay any attention to that higher three?
Okay. Well, I did. But again, I wanna address the way I'm gonna answer it may not necessarily be reflective of theosophical philosophy, but my impression is that that level responsibility is and accountability is for sure enforced in humankind, and it's up to them to earn those higher levels of consciousness that can only be attained through self-effort and higher levels of introspection.
This is the doctrine of hope and responsibility. You said responsibility.
Yeah.
There's also a doctrine of hope in there too.
Oh yeah, of course. There's no. Everyone has a fair chance to achieve this higher. It's not like there's a ceiling or there is a chance, but some people through effort can achieve that. Well, it's the analog of if I were to make again another analogy, you get out of life what you put in. There's that phrase. If it wouldn't be wise for someone to expect to reach Buddha level higher states of awakened consciousness if the person never meditates, if the person never tries to be more altruistic and help others in need, if there's no effort, no reading, no inquisition, if there's none of that, how can you achieve higher states of consciousness? So it's that is correspondent on the efforts that people put in their lives. Yeah. Any other questions?
Maybe I can make a comment. In the three fundamentals, it is explained that the life wave, as you expressed it, is moved forward by the universal energy. That you said, once you're a man, always a man. The door closes behind you, you cannot go backwards. But in the East, the superstitious peoples think that they can come back as animals. And the clergy do not correct that misnomer over there because they keep control over the people that way, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, yeah, I agree.
But in the middle of the fourth round, where we are, that movement forward by nature has been accomplished. In other words, we're self-conscious entities, and as put forth, we're responsible for our actions. So that push stops there. That once you're self-conscious, you have to move through and into higher levels of consciousness or perception of it, as you said, by self-induced, self-devised effort. It is not automatic anymore. Up to that point it is, but afterwards it isn't. So we improve or go backwards towards animal life according to what we do, as you said, but it's not automatic. Up to that point,
Yes.
nature pushes everything towards a higher expression of itself. But once we reach that self-consciousness, it no longer does, because we have free will and we have choice. And once we use those, then the responsibility for our actions, thinking, speech, and act comes back to us. And that is why karma and reincarnation is called the lost chord of Christianity, because without that philosophy, which took it out, by the way, at 500 AD, in Constantinople, when the council met, they took pre-existence. They said there was anathema against it and took it out of the literature, the philosophy, because it existed. Jesus taught it, Paul taught it, all of the Christian fathers taught it at the beginning. Origen was excommunicated. A lot of them were excommunicated by staying with that philosophy of pre-existence. Because if the soul does not pre-exist, then a new one is created every time you come. And that, I think, does not make any sense. But that's what they did. So now they need to put it back in. The Christian religion has to put it back in. Because as long as they continue on with that dogmatic philosophy, people cannot truly understand who they are. Because if that lie exists in my own heart, then that inner life is not open to me. You have to remove it. And you know, you said the spirit is everywhere, it is omniscient, so how can it be missing from anything or anywhere? It makes no sense. I'm not criticizing the religion, I'm just saying that to educate the Western world, they need to correct their error, because they took it out. Perhaps then some of the church fathers didn't understand philosophy, but surely at this stage they should understand what it means and put it back in.
So reading between the lines here, Sandra gave a talk some time ago on thou art that. Okay, we're gods in the making, if you will. If we want to go that way, we can go that way through our own effort, or we can become an animal man. We're not an animal, but we're an animal in a physical body. Is that what I'm hearing?
I dare to say, if a human being would spend many existences only dwelling in mundane pleasures and that's it, theoretically, yeah, that would be the case. There's no transcendence for that.
Our consciousness does not even talk to us anymore.
It's not really being addressed. Yeah, it's if someone were to can someone develop muscle to look like a bodybuilder without ever doing a single push-up, a single exercise? Man, the answer is no. You got if you get out of life what you put in. So that would be the way I would answer that question. Any other question? I believe it's time. Okay, so we're gonna wrap up the presentation. People online can watch this talk and present questions if needed. And as mentioned before, we hold our meetings in this in this lodge from the United Lodge of Theosophy in Bethesda, Maryland, every Sunday from 11 to 12. Everyone is invited to come in person or join us online. Thank you very much. And
one more thing, we won't be online for this, but in the afternoon, first and third Sundays, this being the first Sunday, we are studying the key to Theosophy. We want to continue that.
on the round table, yes.
And next week's talk is on Triad.
Next week.
Triad.
The Triad. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you all.